get started. So welcome, my name is Julie Drzezinski. I'm the Associate Director in the Center for Career Development, also a Holy Cross alum, class of 99. And then with me tonight, kind of helping to co-moderate the panel, Meredith Fluke. Meredith, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everybody. I'm Meredith Fluke, and I'm the director of the Cantor Gallery.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to kind of talk through how we're going to approach the evening tonight. So we've got 4 fabulous alumna here to chat with us, Mary, Tricia, Nicole, and Ginevra. In a minute, I'll have them each kind of introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background. And Meredith and I will kind of co-moderate the panel and kind of move through. We've got some questions planned to kind of present to the alums to have them share their experience. We would definitely encourage you talking, like please use the chat. So if there's questions that you have, you know, we have plenty planned, but I want to make sure we get questions from the audience. So if there's questions that you have as we're talking, please feel free to add those to the chat. And we'll, you know, if we see those, we'll try to kind of insert them along the way. And then we'll definitely save some time towards the end, probably by like 7:45, try to kind of wrap so that we have some time at the end to also just open it up for questions from students and folks in the room as well. All right. So I guess to start, I would love to hear from each an alum that's joined us tonight to kind of share a little bit about kind of what you currently do and kind of your career trajectory, you know, since graduating from Holy Cross, kind of how you got to where you are today. So Mary, do you want to start? Because you're my screen right to the right.
Sure, sounds great. Well, hi, everybody. And again, thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. My current job is a preservation planner with the city of Boston, and it did take a while to get there. I was a Holy Cross graduate from 2008. I had a double major in art history and English. So I went to graduate school for preservation, and I worked in a whole slew of jobs before I got to where I am. Essentially, what I do now is I manage 3 historic districts within the city of Boston. I review applications for exterior alterations, and I work with other city agencies on large-scale development projects and other relevant matters. And as part of my job, I also manage and run 2 to 3 public hearings a month and several other meetings in addition to that. So I'll just share quickly that after I got out of college, my first job was not in the field, and I went to graduate school about 3 years after graduating Holy Cross. And after that, I started working at the state and municipal level in government. And then I went to the nonprofit sector for a while. So now I am back in municipal government.
Great, thank you, Mary, for sharing. Tricia, did you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tricia Pongratz. I am the Executive Director of McCullough Hall Historical Museum in Morristown, New Jersey. I'm a class of 1992 graduate, and I was an English major. When I left Holy Cross, I went immediately into graduate school and pursued a PhD in medieval art history, and then ended up in a startup gallery that became the Museum of Biblical Art Mobia at Columbus Circle in New York City. And I left there in 2013 and went to the Met for a year to work on my own research on historic churches and synagogues, American churches and synagogues, and then got the job at McCullough Hall, which is out here in New Jersey. So very sort of circuitous, just lots of, honestly, lots of help along the way and lots of opportunities along the way. So the historic house that I manage now, pre-COVID, saw about 7,000 people in person a year. We're turning it into a community museum. Although it's been around for 70 years, it was it hewed pretty close to the historic house model. So we're actually turning it into a community hub right now and have gone very, very virtual, like all of you, since March 16th.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Ginevra, do you want to share?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ginevra Lavoci. I'm head of leadership gifts at the Frick Collection. I graduated Holy Cross in 2009. And so I graduated, I said 2009. So I kind of graduated into a recession. So it was a tough job market. And right after Holy Cross, I probably did about almost a year of just internships, different ones. I had one that summer at the National Gallery, which was real in DC, which was really exciting. And then I kind of reality really set in when I moved back home with my parents in the Bronx. And I did a lot of then unpaid internships. So I interned at the Met in their development office for 2 days a week. And I interned at an art fair another 2 days a week called Scope. I'm not even sure if Scope exists anymore. I did learn that I didn't want to work at an art fair though from that internship. Nothing against art fairs. It just wasn't, learned that wasn't for me. And then I would say probably June 2010, I started at the Frick as a development assistant. So I was kind of an assistant to the whole Department of External Affairs. And while I was working as a development assistant, about 2 years into that job, I went back to school for my master's degree in art history. And I continued to work as I did my master's, and I kind of moved throughout the department. And now I really work about our fundraising efforts for any kind of gift that is restricted for a specific purpose. So I've fundraised for exhibition programs, for the library, and we currently are working on a building project. We're in a silent phase there. So also working really closely with our deputy director for external affairs on that. So I've also worked with all different types of donors, from government agencies to foundations and individuals and corporate sponsors.
Fabulous. Thank you, Ginevra. Nicole, did you want to share?
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all well wherever you are. I will say a lot of us have been thinking of you and how crazy this year and last year was for you. So I graduated in 2004. I was a double major in art history and history. I took a year off, and like Ginevra, I did some unpaid internships. I started in a paid position at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown. I was a gallery interpreter, which meant I just gave tours to people all day long, which was an awesome first job. It's still probably my favorite job because that's all I did was talk to people and read about art history. I then went to graduate school, and I have a master's with a focus in 19th century American art. After that, I had a 1-year post-academic position at Smith College at their museum, which was great, which segued me to a job at Vassar at their museum, where I was the only educator. And that was a staff of 8, including the security guards, which was wonderful. And that job had publications as a side. So it was a wonderful way to kind of see a different part of the field. While I was there, I was a consultant at Storm King and looked at their docent program, and then accepted my position at the MFA. I started there 9 years ago as the manager of school programs, which meant I oversaw all of our K through 12 on-site programming and the 125 gallery instructors who led those programs. My job transitioned over the course of the last year and is transitioning in the midst of COVID and significant layoffs at the MFA now, so that I manage gallery learning and collection training. So now I oversee all 500 guides at the MFA. And if there is a person with you in the galleries, which won't happen for a while, right now, if there's a person with you digitally, I'm responsible both for the content. So if you're in 3rd grade and you're learning about Paul Revere, I've thought about what that experience is that's going to keep you engaged. You're in 3rd grade, so it's probably pretty easy. 8th grade, that's harder. And now I'm kind of transitioning to not only think about 3rd graders and 8th graders, but also all of our visitors for those in-gallery encounters. So not public programs or things like that, but that really, between a work of art and another person. And in the meantime, I also consulted at the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis for 4 years while I was also at the MFA and worked with their student docents.
Great, thank you. So fabulous to hear just kind of the different kind of career paths and the different kind of opportunities and things that have kind of led to where you all are today. So thank you for sharing. I would love to hear next a little bit about kind of what drew you or what brought you to Holy Cross. So kind of like why Holy Cross and why was that a choice for you? So Mary, did you want to start?
Sure. Well, I had, friends of my family had gone to Holy Cross, so I was already sort of familiar with the school. And here's a fun fact: I actually have a photograph of myself at 4 years old in a Holy Cross T-shirt, and I'm from Staten Island, so I wasn't even in the, vicinity of the school. But as I got older, there were more reasons that became important to me. I had gone to a Jesuit high school, so I really wanted to continue on that path. And I was pretty adamant that I wanted a liberal arts education. I really went into college not really knowing what I wanted to do. So I wanted to have a lot of opportunities open for me. And it was also really important to me to have like small class sizes and to be taught by professors and not teaching assistants. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't want it for myself. And I know this sounds incredibly cliche, but honestly, the first time I visited the campus, it really just felt right and it felt good. And it felt good for the 4 years that I attended there. So kind of boring, but that is my story.
Great, thank you, Mary. Trisha, how about you?
I would echo almost word for word what Mary said. What I went to public school, K to 12, and when I was looking at, I knew I wanted liberal arts, I knew I wanted small, and I knew I wanted to be taught by professors. I didn't know I wanted a Jesuit education, and it was the same thing when I came for the campus tour. And I know that you're always led by the best of the best on your campus tour, but what really got me at Holy Cross was the notion men and women for others. I liked that. And I liked that the education was training you to be the best person you could be so that you could be the best person that you could be out in the larger community. That really, and I love the library. There was just something about walking up the steps and, I really, really loved the library. And I had a great 4 years there. I had so many opportunities and was so encouraged. And I think the most important thing was my curiosity was always encouraged. And I, like Mary, I didn't know, I came in pre-med. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I ended up sophomore year, I took a seminar in the art history department and just sort of somehow declared an English major and never left art history. And that was it. So it was really, it's great. I mean, it was really great. And my son, who just graduated last year, actually went to the University of Scranton, which I didn't know was Jesuit until you walk onto the campus and you just are hit by men and women for others. And I was hoping he would go there and he did. So.
That's great, thank you. Ginevra, how about you?
So I came into Holy Cross and I graduated as a double major with classics and art history. And when I was doing my research, I was like, oh, well, they have this great classics department. Also, I was drawn to the Jesuit education. I have 3 older siblings. 2 of them went to Fordham. 1 of them went to Boston College. My brothers went to Fordham Prep. So I was familiar with, the kind of Jesuit ethos, I guess, before I went in. I wanted to kind of experience that for myself. And I kind of came in and was sort of interested in museum work too. So I don't know, that's, I think how the double major with the art history was pretty natural after that, at that point.
Thank you. And Nicole?
I mean, a lot of the same things. My local congressman came to speak at my Key Club 8 million years ago. And he was like, I went to Holy Cross. And I was like, I should check that out. So Mike McNulty for the win. I was pre-law, but that was like for a semester. I mean, art history was the thing. I had taken art history in high school. I think Holy Cross it was something more than just a college. And I know that's really corny. Unfortunately, you guys are all enrolled because we're just selling you on the school you already go to. But it's nice to talk about. it felt like there was going to be a whole other dimension, and it was the men and women for others. It was, I remember my interviewer talking about like SPUD programs and immersion trips, and those are the things that were so crucial, I think, to, you know, I will talk later, like I definitely use my art history every single day that I used at Holy Cross, that I learned there. But those values, it sounds really corny, but those were essential in going and then essential in my experience.
So Nicole, since you gave me the segue, can you talk a little bit about how your art history, visual arts, other classes, less so, what kinds of skills that you feel like you developed in those classes that you feel like you're using in your position now or in life? In general?
Yeah. I feel really fortunate in that I am someone who has a degree in art history, and I think, you know, everyone on this call is using their degrees. I still have my notebooks. They're on my desk at the MFA, so I haven't seen them in a very long time. But you know, I have the good fortune in that a large part of my job is teaching people art history, and so I am at a podium most Thursday afternoons, and now I've moved to virtual teaching. And so I saw a Holy Cross professor in line in the cafeteria at the MFA, and I stopped him and I said, "I'm still using your notebook. It's on my desk just around the corner." And so I feel very fortunate. I think the other part of my Holy Cross experience that I use a lot is what I had from kind of clubs. Though I'm sure all of you are incredibly involved people, sometimes clubs are amazing, but also nonsense goes down in meetings and you have to negotiate personalities. I was also an RA. That comes in handy. Like you have to run meetings and you have to negotiate personalities and multiple wants and needs. And that I think I'm surprised at how much kind of Purple Pride Day circa 2002 of like making that t-shirt decision. You're like, oh, that actually is not unhelpful when you're talking to the director of the MFA. I'm sure he'd love to hear that. Like I'm just equating him with Purple Pride Day. But I think those experiences really also made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, equally challenging. Mary or Trisha or Ginevra, can you talk a little bit about the skills that you learned in art history that you are applying in your work and life right now?
I mean, I think my art history background is really helpful in what I do. While I'm not doing original research or creating content, but I'm supporting the people who do. So I think just the knowledge and the comfort with the material is really helpful, especially since I'm the person who's writing these proposals. So it's kind of like taking the raw material from the curators that maybe is a little too scholarly and adjusting it for the right audience, or finding the right prospect for our education program who's really going to be invested in it, and someone we could go to again and, you know, repeatedly for multi-year funding. So I find that, you know, the art history knowledge is really helpful. I think knowing how to write, and that writing skill is so important. And I really think that once you've written an academic paper, other types of writing are so much easier after that, honestly. So if you could master that, I think that's really key. And while I was at Holy Cross, I did a lot of different kind of work study jobs. So one of my work study jobs was at the Cantor Art Gallery. So which was great. So, you know, while I'm not doing any kind of like art handling at all now, I did a little bit there, and it kind of just gives you an appreciation for what all of your colleagues do and a kind of just a basic understanding. And I think that's really helpful because in a museum environment, there's just a lot of collaboration. So I think, yeah, getting along with your colleagues, and actually what Nicole said about kind of running a meeting and negotiating personalities is really true. And it's amazing how much of your time is spent doing that.
Yeah, I have to say, Ginevra, I'm really glad you're here, because I think, you know, having been development adjacent in my life at, you know, certain times, you know, I think there are a lot of people in development positions at museums who have deep knowledge of art history and who need it in those kinds of jobs, because and broad, right? You can't just, you have to be able to talk to everyone about all different kinds of art all the time. And it's a really important thing to think about as a career option, because it really uses a lot of art history in that work. And I know you do a lot of it too, right, Trisha?
Yeah. Yes. The great thing about being at a small museum is that you get to do everything. And the biggest challenge of being at a small museum is you get to do everything.
Mhm.
One thing that I really took away from my art history courses, and it was specifically the art history courses at Holy Cross, I came in at a seminar level. I never actually had a 100 or a 200 level. I came in at an elective level. Public speaking. I will never forget the first seminar paper that I had to present, which was my first semester sophomore year. And I was young in the, everybody else was in an upper class. And the nervousness and the fact that we were forced to do that, and you didn't know why you were forced to do that, but the benefit of that, the benefit of really being told, this is how you give an academic presentation, this is how you give an off-the-cuff presentation. That was my first introduction to that. I didn't have that in high school. I didn't have debate. I didn't have anything. And knowing how, as important as it is to know how to tailor your material when you write for an audience, it's the same thing when you're giving a tour. It's the same thing when you're giving a pitch to a funder or a potential friend or donor. Those were skills that I started at Holy Cross, and that was because of the small class sizes, and it was invaluable, and also very important to learn how to take criticism and constructive criticism, because that can hurt if you're used to, you're all at Holy Cross, you're all bright, and we're all probably pretty close to the top of your class, and you get that professor who says, you get the paper back and it's all red, or you have the post public speaking disaster that was my sophomore year, but you learn it. You learn to hunger for that criticism, which I think just makes you stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I would echo what Trish said. I'm not really using my art history knowledge on a daily basis because I mainly work in architecture, but it's still related. But I'd say that one of the most important skills that I took away from my visual arts classes was how to communicate effectively and how to explain complex concepts. During my senior year capstone seminar, particularly, we spent a lot of time learning how to guide school-age children through their own personal interpretation of a piece of art. And it turns out that exercise works very well with adults too. And I still use that not every day, but it comes in very handy. Visual arts is pretty subjective. My field in particular, there are so many people that don't care about preservation or who don't even know what preservation even is. In my role, I do have the opportunity to be an educator and to help people understand why they should care about historic buildings and protecting architectural and cultural resources. And people start to care once they can form a connection to what you're talking about. That skill that I developed at Holy Cross has been invaluable.
Well, I think you guys have jumped into this next question, which is, not just about skills that you've developed, but also, sort of the bigger liberal arts framework and how that has helped you, and how you've leveraged it in your careers. Nicole, you're nodding.
Sure.
I love that.
I'm a nodder, which I was told not to do.
No, it's
We'll work on that next call. I was just thinking that Jerry Lemke taught me how to read the New York Times, which is huge. And he had us read it with, the ads and just that skill of, and I, not to brag, but I read the Times before that class. But I mean, like, he really taught me how to read a newspaper and how to consider that placement. And I feel like that level of critical thinking is that is that's my end goal with every student who comes to the MFA, is I want them to pick apart an image and understand. But that is just such a great example. And I want to go back to Trisha, you were talking, I think the exacting standards, that was tough. And I'm sure you guys have been, students on the call have gotten some brutal feedback on papers or from presentations. And I know how much it stings. And I totally went back to my room and cried. Thanks, Virginia Regan, for that C when I started medieval. That was awesome. I was like, does she know who I am? Does she know I do art history? That was the best. I love her to this day. And I feel like some of those, what felt like really hard knocks at the time, were absolutely essential for the arts field is great because you have people who are looking so closely. You have people who read the paper really closely. You have people who are looking really closely. And so I think I love my colleagues, but I think that it is helpful to be able to understand, to be able to separate the personal from the feedback. Absolutely crucial. If you can do that now, that's great.
And it really prepares you for a performance review when you get that first job. So it's very, very important. The other thing is the way that the curriculum was constructed, at least when I was there from 88 to 92. It's probably changed a little, but what the liberal arts education did was it really made me and my peers there lifelong learners. Those classes, you had to take your core, you had to take what you had to take for but then the electives that you could take, and you could really figure out, oh my gosh, astronomy is not astrology. This is hard. There were moments seriously, there were moments like this. And the way I just read a reference today on Twitter, as a matter of fact, about the importance of being a lifelong learner in today's economy. Only they don't call it that anymore. It's called upskilling. Holy Cross taught me how to upskill. And that is, if you can do that, you're going to continually learn and change and grow and be able to adjust to what is really, in the best sense of the word, a dynamic environment, but it's also a really volatile environment. So it taught me never to stop being curious and never to stop learning.
So to switch gears just a little bit, I'd love to hear from each of you or some of you around, kind of as you think about your kind of career path and kind of where you are today, what planned or unplanned events kind of presented themselves that was maybe like a kind of a deciding point or kind of a turning point in that kind of career path?
I mean, I never expected to be at my first job for 10 years, which I essentially have. That sounds like it's actually very linear, but I can tell you that when I started that job, I was like, oh, I'll be here 2 years maximum. That's it. And then I'm moving on to, the next thing. So I never expected that there would be so much upward mobility, and that honestly, my bosses at the time would be so flexible and supportive. And, I was basically leaving. I would come in early and leave in the middle of the day and go to class up the street for like 2 hours, come back, finish work, and then go back and forth between two places. So I guess it's always worth asking, because if I had just assumed they wouldn't do that, I would have left. I would have had a lot more student debt, things like that. So I think it's always worth asking. And I think this is something that development officers do all the time, because you're like, well, it's the worst they can say, no?
Great.
And yeah, I just never expected that I'd still be at the Frick, but I'm really happy that it has worked out that way.
And Ginevra, like a follow-up question to that, while I have you, kind of knowing that then you stayed and you saw that upward mobility, like how did you kind of determine as you moved along that it was the right fit for you? Like what was kind of the deciding factors that you felt like this is where I should be?
I think that the real deciding factor was probably about 5 years ago. I was sort of doing more like planned giving, which I was kind of like, I don't really know if I'm really interested in getting a planned giving program started, but I had just finished my art history degree and I was like, I think I do really want to do more, gifts and grants and supportive specific programs. And there just happened to be that my colleague left and that job opened up. So there was just like a natural reason to stay. Otherwise, I do think I would have gone and done that at a different institution. I probably would be doing the same thing, but just at a different place.
Okay, that's great. And I think that's the beauty of like this whole like world of work and this career path, right? That like something like that can just present itself and it's like, oh, this is the next natural fit for me. And I tell students that all the time. You can make as many lists as you want, but it's not, you can't always check the box because you just never know what's going to present itself at a given time. That's great. Thank you. What about any others, Nicole or Trisha or Mary, about kind of unplanned or planned events that kind of came your way and how it impacted your career?
Well, something that was unplanned for me was that during my senior year, Virginia Regan was the one who really encouraged me to explore preservation. I had no idea what it even was. I was interested in American decorative arts and furniture. So she was like, you should really I encourage you to look at this field. So I kind of just, put it at the back of my mind, whatever. And then I went home to Staten Island for a while after I graduated. I took a job that was not in my field at all, but I got it because I had been promised. So when I graduated, like I wanted to be this art curator, and I quickly realized that that was not going to happen. But I took my first job under the understanding that the CEO of the company I was working for was also an amateur art collector. So I would get to curate his art collection. And anyway, I found out that I hated doing that. I hated it. So, Professor Regan's encouragement was always in the back of my mind. So after realizing that I hated what I was doing, I decided to apply to graduate school, and here I am. But I'll also share that during that time, and since I've graduated graduate school, I've had a lot of jobs, and I do keep looking for those new opportunities. I've been able to work in the state government as a preservation planner, in municipal government as a preservation planner. I've worked in the nonprofit sector for a while. So I've had a pretty broad taste of the field, which is good because it's like I kind of get that out in the beginning of my career, and now I can, have figured out what I really want to focus on. So I encourage people to keep an open heart and keep an open mind, and don't be afraid to try new things and try different jobs, and something will stick eventually.
So it looks like, so great question, Demetrius. So
Yeah.
each of you have talked a little bit about this. So the question is, are internships the only or best way to enter into the art scene, specifically in the line of museums? What are your thoughts on that?
Demetrius, this is changing, but unfortunately for a long, long time, and like when I say this is changing, I'm talking like in the past year. More museums are moving towards paid internships because they suddenly realized just yesterday, they're like, oh, that's a bad idea. I had one unpaid internship. It was not something that I could do when I was at Holy Cross. I needed to work over the summer. And so the summer between my senior year, but junior and senior year, I did do an unpaid internship at the New York State Museum because my parents were like, no, that seems important. My first position was a paid position at the Clark. So every summer when we talk to the interns, I'm the exception because everyone else at the MFA raises their hands and says, no, I interned here. There are strides. There are definite strides to make that change. But Demetrius, I'm assuming that, within the time that you're coming out of school, it's still going to be a paid internship path. But keep your eyes open for entry-level job. I think the most important thing you can do, not the most important, one of the things that you can do is I bookmarked all of the museums I wanted to work at like junior year. because you could bookmark things in the year 2000. And I would check the listings every Friday. I did have friends, and just look at what people were looking for. And so it's like, okay, if I wanted to be a curator, I need to have a PhD. If I want an entry-level job, it's this. So I think getting really familiar with what's the job you think you might want and what are they looking for, that might help you kind of either pick the right internship or do a leapfrog over it. But I will say internships are still, and I'm sure Ginevra, I'm wondering what the Frick is doing right now, and other places.
Yeah.
Sorry to moderate, Julie.
No, I love it.
Pass it
Go
over.
for it. It's great.
We do have an internship program and it is paid, but honestly, I would say only recently we've come to the consensus that it was like, well, we have these interns that are paid here, but these ones that are unpaid here. And I tell people this all the time. I did do a lot of internships while I was an undergrad, but part of the reason why I was able to do that was just where I was geographically, was that I was from New York. I lived in, I still do, but I lived in New York. I lived with my parents over the summer. So I could do something unpaid because I didn't have to worry about housing or anything, where I could kind of, I think like one summer I babysat and did an unpaid internship at the same time. But and the reason I was able to do those unpaid internships till I found a real job was because I was living at home with my parents, and that's just based purely on geography. So, but there definitely has been a movement that, you know, like, oh, to make the field more equitable, we need to pay everyone, which is a pretty simple conclusion that took a long time to get there. And Nicole, I think something we're also looking at in the Frick is just like, after, you know, you have people come through your internship program, how do you engage them so that they not only get entry-level positions, but then move up through mid-level and senior level positions? Because that's how you have a more diverse and equitable workforce and kind of in terms of cultural institutions.
And I would jump in too. There's one resource, and I'll email it to Julie and to Meredith, but it's called Muse Weekly, M-U-S-E Weekly. That's a great listserv to follow. Every Thursday, they send out sort of a recitation. It's primarily decorative arts, but it gives you a good sense of who's looking for what. And I would also encourage you, all of you, please look at the small museums. Don't just go to the large name museums. So for example, I am at McCullough Hall Historical Museum, which is the best museum you have never heard of. In fact, most people in Morristown have never heard of it. However, one of the wonderful, my wonderful interns is actually her first job is at the Frick. She is an assistant to the registrar, and she left McCullough Hall she had a master's from the Seton Hall Museum program, and she's working now at the Frick. And a lot of the interns that we train, so we're very small, but you're getting a lot of very hands-on, and we do pay. You either take our internships and we pay you New Jersey's minimum wage, which right now is $11.50, or you take it for credit. So like many of us on this call, when I was there, I never had an internship. I just couldn't afford to. I worked 2 jobs over the summer. I was work study all 4 years. I worked in the library and the archive at Holy Cross, and I babysat. There was no way an unpaid internship was anything I could even think about. However, the track that I was on too, I was on an academic track. I mean, I went right into graduate school and did an MA PhD. So I didn't even know I was going to be in the museum until I was in a museum. But the other thing is, and I know this is a later question, but remember all of us and reach out to us. You know, this is the beginning of you building your network. And that, I mean, it's like, Virginia Regan she was my mentor. I mean, I'm still in touch with Virginia. She oversaw my senior thesis. She was the one who said, well, if you're studying John Ruskin, I don't understand why you just don't learn Latin and go do medieval. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do that. And then came back. I mean, I ended up in the American wing at the Met doing 19th century churches and synagogues. But the through line, other than architecture and Gothic revival to Gothic to back to Gothic revival and beyond, was Virginia Regan. And that's Holy Cross. Yeah, I know, big heart.
Also
I
wanna
ran
say-
into, sorry, I was just going to say, I ran into her on the steps of the BPL on New Year's Eve this year. So
I want to, just a small museum thing to say that, because small museums are more willing, oftentimes are more willing to pay, part of the change that is being enacted, in the big museums is a result of the fact that people can get paid internships elsewhere, right? So, keep forcing those big museums to think about paying you by going and getting jobs that actually pay you. That is, I think that change will keep happening as long as we keep demanding it to happen. So this is just a little, make people pay you.
That's right. And I would love to talk a little bit more, Tricia, it was a fabulous segue to kind of mentors and building that network. So I'd love to hear from any of you around that piece. Like, how did you identify mentors? Like, not just at Holy Cross, but throughout your career, how have you kind of utilized them, and how do you kind of build and maintain that network of people that you can rely on?
I have found the people I sit next to at conferences tend to be, or the people I talk to in the bathroom. I'm not a creep. But it's just the people that they asked a really great question, so you go up to them afterward, or they were a really great panelist. There's a network of folks I met. The New England Museum Association is a really great conference. That's a great website you should look at too, especially for small museum jobs. And they have made the commitment that they will also always post salary on their website. I have made friends that, we had weekly calls or monthly calls, and they're people that I've been in touch with now for 9 years because we stayed after a session and just started talking. I have been given official mentors and have never found those to work out as well as the people you just kind of stumble upon, the people you have lunch with. Like, I'm thinking of curators who were nice enough when I worked at the Clark and not, they were like, yeah, I'll have lunch with whoever. And you just pepper them with questions in a non-aggressive, stalkerish way. But notice we are all happy to talk to you about what we're doing and how we got to where we are. And I have found people I have only met generous people in this field. And as Tricia was saying, like, now you know all of us. So conferences, and then whoever will have lunch with you.
And I would add, it's hard. So I went to school before there was email. I didn't even have a computer at school. You had like cursor, like you went, so email is huge. One of the nicest things when I turn on my computer in the morning is to have an email from somebody I didn't expect. And as Nicole said, ask a question or introduce yourself, or if you met, or follow up. The other thing that I think is very good when you're looking for jobs, have a LinkedIn whatever you call the thing, the LinkedIn. Go onto the LinkedIn, make yourself a profile page, and start to invite people to join you. And this field is generous. Now, that's not to say it's perfect, because there will always be a stinker, and there are politics and things like that. We're humans, right? So there's a fallibility factor. But we're generous, and we do love a good question. And remember, everybody wants to meet other people. It isn't just you. So I would use the digital platforms that you have available to you. And do not hesitate to advocate for yourself, and don't hesitate. If you have a question, for heaven's sakes, ask the question. Just send an email and see what happens. And sometimes you get one back and sometimes you don't. And so after a certain amount of time, you can send a second one. Our inboxes get full, but it's relationship building. And I'm sure, as Ginevra could tell you, it's like anything else, you're relationship building, right? And you're not asking for anything, it's for advice or but it takes time, and people stick. The people you meet, you tend to stick.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think like be willing to ask for informational interviews because that's what you're doing at this point. You're kind of gathering information, and these are connections that will come up later on. And then also later on in your career, be willing to take informational interviews too and kind of have that dialogue going. And I find too that the more that I kind of work in this field, the smaller it is, and you kind of get to know everyone. And then, you know, people that I used to work with at the Frick move on to other institutions. So then that's kind of a region to a whole other network. So you kind of organically kind of start to build your network through like, yeah, having lunch with people in the lunchroom, which is actually something I really, really miss about being in person. And, you know, maybe I don't know, or excuse me, I don't have experience as a registrar, but I know people who do. So if someone came to me, I could always connect them with someone who works in our registrar's office.
Yeah, not being in the museum world, you know, I'm obviously not, but you know, the preservation world is pretty small too, so I think I can relate in that respect. What everybody else has said, you know, your network builds over time, and it happens organically, which is great for a shy person like myself. But eventually, you know, you tend to see the same people over and over again. You meet in the same conferences. You just by being in the same geographic region, you know, you see the same names pop up over and over again. So, you know, when I meet somebody at a conference or at a meeting or whatever, you know, I always make a point to ask how they got to where they are. And I find that that's a easy icebreaker because everybody loves to talk about themselves. So, you know, just don't ever be afraid to ask, you know, how did you get here? And somebody, you know, will always be willing to share. And, you know, that's the perfect start to a conversation. And, you know, just don't be afraid to ask. And yeah, just don't be afraid.
I also feel like there's a plug here, a sort of implicit, explicit plug for conferences. That, you know, just even if you don't have the best, if you're not even giving a paper, try and go to conferences where you can. Some of them aren't expensive. Many of them will give scholarships if they are to young people. You know, use that youth that you have to get all of the resources that, you know, those of us who've been in the field want to give you, where we say, oh, you know, we want young people at these conferences. And then those are great places to, you know, to really just hear people talking, to understand your field better or whatever. And I would also say this because you know, one person that I consider a mentor is here, just Trisha. Sometimes you just feel like I haven't spoken to that person in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and you have to get over that feeling of, oh, I never, you know, that professor, you know, it's been 3 years and now I need a letter of recommendation or something like that. Like, get over that always and come back to that place, and just like, they want to hear from you. They all want to hear from you. Professors who are on this call are nodding, like they still want to hear from you 3 years, 4 years later, and they still want to help you after that time. So that's an important thing to know as you sort of leave and move on in your lives, that you can always come back to Holy Cross and ask your professors for help. I just have a quick question about packaging. So how do you write your resume? How do you package yourself? How do you get to that interview? You know, in those first steps out, in those next couple steps, what are some advice you have for packaging?
I have very strong feelings about this. Sorry. I've read a lot of job applications and I've sat through literally hundreds of interviews. Apply for the job and make sure you want that job. I think one of the things that can be really tricky when you're looking at any institution and you just want to be there, you just want to be in the field, you just want the foot in the door. Sometimes those cover letters read really clearly that they just want the foot in the door. And you have to think about the manager who on the other side is really desperate to hire for that job, and they want to hire someone they're working with for that specific role. And so I think wherever you're applying, make sure that you're being really intentional about that position and what you can bring to it. And it might be a place that you have a really strong personal affinity for. So the Clark was the museum I grew up going to. Oh my God, do I have feelings about that museum? I didn't put that in my application. The MFA is the place where I decided I wanted to work at museums. I did not put that in my cover letter. I totally told them the first day and made everybody cry. But like, you have to apply for the job because all of you have credentials. And that goes back to, I think Trisha was talking about upskilling, and, you know, Mary and Ginevra have also talked about the skills that they brought to their roles. You have to be really specific about, I can do this. And it sounds super corporate, but you're going to have to be very exacting because one of the other things, and I'm sure Julie will tell you this, I sat with HR once for an entry-level job search when I was early on in my days at the MFA, and they tell you 30 seconds. Guys, that's generous. That's super generous. It's like 10
10 to 15.
seconds.
Yep, 10. I say that all
Like,
the time, Nicole. Yep.
they're looking at that first paragraph. They're looking, like, some people do cover letter first, some people do resume first. You have to make it really, because they're saying who's for this job, because they're not like, what are Sally's greatest hopes and dreams and how can we help her come to fruition as a young person? Like, they want you for that job because they want to fill that yesterday. So sorry, I have really strong feelings.
I
Yeah.
do too. I do too. I mean, so picture you are the hiring manager. The other thing is you need to take into considerations, particularly right now, and I would say for the next many years, the job market is going to be really tight. So the volume of applications for each job is going to be through the roof. So 10 to 15 is probably going to be generous in 2 years. What I am looking for when I am either hiring or I am looking for an internship, I know that you did not decide to invest in this career because you came to McCullough Hall. I do expect you to know what we're about and to have visited the website and to say something. I can tell when you have literally just replaced McCullough Hall Historical Museum with New York Historical or the Frick or Jockey Hollow. I can tell. You need to, if you are asking somebody to spend time reading your cover letter, you need to put time into it, making it specific for that place. Because even if you have never visited, and you're not going to necessarily have visited McCullough Hall, but we're getting very good virtually now. You can I'm sorry, I have a rescue bird and she's up. So that's Bird. She's in the background. She's been really good for the whole call. Put time into it. Put time. Know who I am. Because I'll be very honest with you. I know what you're going to get from working with me. I know that. I want to know what I'm going to get from working with you. And it doesn't, it doesn't need to be something. It'd be great if you knew Instagram, man, and Twitter. That would be Hootsuite. It'd be really good if you knew. And don't underestimate the skills that you take for granted, because a lot of your hiring managers right now are going to be Gen X and whatever comes after me. And I can tell you, I am your parents' age. The Twitter, the Instagram, Facebook, put on that you know how to do that and you can link them. In a tiny museum, that's huge. Bird agrees. So, but really, what are you going to bring? I know what you're going to get. I need to know what you're going to bring. And I need to know just a little bit about you.
Yeah, I think it's important to not only tailor your cover letters, but to also tailor your resume. When I look at job postings, for example, I read the job description and I find out exactly what they're looking for. And then on my resume, I make sure I highlight all of those things. Because, cover letter is important, but your resume is also just as important. So it's really important that you write, each cover letter for each job separately. Like, you can use the template, but make sure that you are treating, this cover letter as special for this job. It really goes, it goes a long way when it shows that you've put time and effort into it. I feel like I've been successful doing that. So read those job descriptions very, very carefully and make sure that you highlight that in both your resume and your cover letter.
I would agree 110% with what everybody just said. And just to reiterate, I mean, it is really apparent when you have someone come in for an interview or you're reading their application that they're not interested in actually doing the job, but they just want to be at X place. And it's within like, I mean, I feel like, within 30 seconds. And one of my pet peeves is when the applicant hasn't done any research, and I will ask specific questions to show what they've, the biggest question I think I ask is, what excites you most about our building project, because it's all right there. And the information is out there. So really do your research, because that's something that I ask every single time. And it is just really obvious when the person is trying to either get out of their former job or something's going on there. I don't know exactly what it is, but I can sense that there's something going on at their current position and that they just really want to move. And that's not really enough to get you to convince me that you'll be a good addition to our team.
Fabulous. It was like everything I say in meetings with students. It was fabulous. So I know we're got just a few minutes left. Like Meredith and I certainly have some final closing questions, but I wanted to open up to the group. If there are other questions from the group, you can certainly put it in the chat, or I feel like it's a small enough group where you could just unmic, put your camera on and ask your question.
I'd just like to echo what you all said. I'm Melissa Trafton. I'm a visiting assistant professor. I just wanted to echo what you've all said. I've had a long career in museums as well. And that question of networking, as an example, I still am in touch with the 4 other young women with whom I started at the National Gallery in September of 1993. We all went through human resources together, and some of them have stayed in museum work. One of them is still at the National Gallery. But, as Meredith said, I just occasionally send an email that's made me think of you. Do you remember when? Great exhibition when you just did Japanese animals. That must have been a big deal with the registrar, all these things. So I would encourage you to develop those networks at conferences. And I will say, I think one of the biggest challenges is don't pull your phone out at a conference. When you're sitting in that chair and you don't know anyone and it's absolutely miserable because you're sitting there and you don't know anyone, look at the brochure, look at the schedule, think about where you're going, stare at the ceiling, but don't pull your phone out.
Even pull a Bridget Jones and ask someone where the bathroom is. It's totally okay. And also I don't like those cocktail networking events. Pick one person. I just could give myself a goal, because if you often have to go by yourself, I'd be like, all you have to do is talk to one person. And you can start by being like, do you know where the bathroom is? Or did you go to this session where yeah, don't take your phone out. I can talk to my brother.
Know that everybody who is at that conference has also had their first conference experience in the past too, and it's felt super awkward.
They're so excited that you just asked them where the bathroom is.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Too, there are a lot of us who really don't want to be at that cocktail party alone. So we're all looking for the same one person to ask. So whenever you think you're really the only one, you're not the only one. And really, don't pull that phone out. Even if you're taking notes on the phone, please find something else to take notes on. Don't take notes on the phone. Just don't turn the phone off.
So we have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Meredith.
From Jinze. What should I do when I apply for my first curatorial / archival internship? He's a sophomore. I have competitive multilingual background. and take 6 relevant courses, but no working experience. So sometimes I think that's right to say, sometimes that first job is the hardest to get. Does anyone have any advice for that kind of, what's the first thing you can do to get yourself moving through a career?
I mean, I don't know how much of a possibility this is right now, but I mean, just my own personal experience at Holy Cross, I did work in the archives at the library. And if you're looking for archival opportunities, I don't know if Mark Savilla still works there, but or whoever the head of the archives is, I would start there because that's somebody in your own backyard.
And
I mean,
would-
oh,
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna pitch Julie for a second. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, sometimes there's a way also you can find volunteer opportunities that aren't the equivalent of an unpaid internship, but that can be a day or 2 a week that can give you some of those skills as well.
I would go to the career planning office.
Yes.
Sorry,
I love it.
I'm just gonna say, like, Dr. Winters looked over all of my job applications up to the MFA. Like, I was in a parking lot in my job at Vassar talking to Dr. Winters. He used to work in the department, guys, 10 years ago. There's something like having someone look over your cover letter and your resume to take what you have and put it forward. So I hired, and it happened to be a Holy Cross alum a couple years ago. She wrote me the best inquiry email, and we just happened to have a job open. She had that email run by career planning. And so you're all very capable, incredible writers, but it's a really different way of writing sometimes. And you also need to take yourself out of it a little bit, because you can either be so precious with your talents, or you can be a little bit too, you can be too humble about your talents too. And I feel like career planning can really help you kind of hit the right tone. Like, again, from introductory emails to cover letters and resumes, like, I leaned on them a lot and found it incredibly helpful. So.
So I know we're out of time. Is there any, I guess the final question would be any kind of parting advice, words of wisdom that we haven't talked about that, that you would want to leave students with here today? And we'll wrap up.
And I promise this will be the last thing. I think we were talking before we got on the call of one of the things, and I think we were all saying how grateful we are for our current positions. It's been, again, you guys are all living this in a really specific way. I think that you have to do the math, and I want you to do that financially. There's a lot of easy jokes about the museum field or the arts field and how much it pays. And I think all of us have classmates from Holy Cross who went on to Goldman Sachs, who went on to find their own, found their own Fortune 500 companies. There's always a trade-off. And so when I've talked to students in the past, like, I get to talk about art history all day. That's my job. So I just put together a class on Monet, and that's ridiculous that was my job for weeks. And I'm going to do a course on Basquiat, and there's a lot of things I get to do in my job. The trade-off is I don't get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm not the person who, like, when we make it to the front page of the Boston Globe, I've only been responsible for that kind of loosely once. And that stinks. But it's not my name in the paper. And I'm not the person who has to fundraise millions of dollars. Like, so when I look at my salary, I just do that math of what's the thing that really matters to me. And that's going to feel really good. Patricia, I think you'll probably say this, like, do the back of the envelope math of this is where I want to live and this is how much it costs. And I know that going out to dinner every Friday night is something that I really love, or having a house at this stage is something that I really want. I make $56,000 a year. So that's how much I make, and I'm in a decent job at the MFA. you have to think of, and I live in Boston. Think about it. Think about what that means to you. And for me, it's great. I went really long on that, but I think it really matters.
I would echo that, do the math. If you are ever looking to see what the salaries are nationally, there is a salary guide put out by AAMD, comes out annually. I think the most recent one is 2019. It used to cost $100. That was how I built my network, because I bought it and everyone came to me and I would send it to them. However, it's now downloadable for free. It is really important to understand how much things cost. That's very important. I would add to that, that we may all have started thinking, oh, we're going to be the curator. But remember, there are so many skills that are needed in a museum, in a historic house museum, in a small nonprofit. We need fundraisers. We need financial people. We need digital people. We need website people. Yes, we need the content providers, but there are all sorts of different skills. You can come from a business background. You can come from an art history background. There are all sorts of different skills that are needed, particularly, as you scale up to larger museums. But know what you're getting into, and really, the field is becoming more and more transparent with regard to salaries, particularly now. But you can always reach out to one of us. If you can't find that guide, you just reach out and someone will be able to help you. Or, I've been in this field since 1999. So I graduated in 92, did graduate school, did the whole dissertation thing. My first job was 99. So I've been in the field for 21 years. I am in Morris County, New Jersey, which is a really expensive place to live. And I work at a historic house museum where I am the executive director, and I make $75,000 a year. So I get to do what I love every day. I'm in my community. I was able to I have two sons who are 19 and 22. I'm married, you heard the bird. I have a golden retriever. I had a lot of flexibility, over that 21 years. But at the end of the day, I make $75,000 a year. And, it's fine. But you have to be able, and remember, I was buying a house a long time ago. The housing prices are much different now. So really look at the AAMD guide and just know we just want you to make an informed decision.
Fabulous. Well, I know we're over time, so thank you. This has been so incredibly helpful, and I appreciate Mary, Tricia, Ginevra, Nicole taking the time to chat with us tonight and just being open and honest. And I'm hoping that, for the students in the room, really got some great advice and just kind of get them thinking about, how to navigate all this and leverage your networks and kind of get out there and talk to people. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for setting this up.
Hey, no problem. Thanks
Well,
for coming.
great.
I appreciate it.
Kind of serious.
Ginevra, I know Emma Hanselman and Sophia Walter. Sorry.
Emma used to work on my team too.
Emma
So-
was one of my students at Brandeis. Yeah, she's the best.
Yeah, and I know Sophia because she was Stephen Berry's assistant for
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we'll have to connect.
Yeah, we'll connect another time. And Meredith, it was great to see you. Bye.
You both.
Thank you,
This was really
ladies.
great.
Great,
Thank
bye.
you so much. We really appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, good to see you.
Bye, Julie.
Bye.